this video, the middle-aged nerds discuss spoilers from books they read decades ago. Do you really need a spoiler alert? Do you really?
Hey,
Yeah,
welcome to
so
Non-Terrestrial Half-Life. We're the YouTube booktube show where we reread books we read in the first half of our life, now that we're older. And we try to see how they hold up, what we think of them today. Bill?
and I'm Bill, also known as Matt Stagger, and today we have joining us Jenn, the Keeper of the Chronicles, also featured on What the Adaptation.
Yes.
Thank you, Jenn, for joining
Thank
us.
you for having me here. I'm very excited to talk about these books with you today. So,
Oh, me too.
What book are we talking
yeah.
about today?
Uh, I guess I'll say we are talking about book 3 of the Chronicles series by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. This book is titled Dragons of Spring Dawning.
First time we have a guest on, we have a couple of questions we would like to find out, get their answers to. When did you first discover you loved books? And what led you to that? And do you remember how old you were when you first realized you loved books?
Okay, yes. I was very young. I don't know the exact age, but I was probably in middle school. And my parents had just divorced and I had moved down to where I was now. And of course I didn't have any friends. I was a young kid. I had lived next to my grandparents growing up and I would ride my bike over to see them all the time and all my friends were gone and I was okay. Actually now I remember how old I was. I was like 12 and I
Okay.
didn't know anybody down here and my parents had just broke up. I was very lonely and one of the things that my mom thought that she would do to raise my intellect and also to keep me company because I was alone, she said, "Why don't I take you to the bookstore and you can pick out some books?" And
Ooh.
of course, in her mind, she was thinking that I would like pick up some Babysitter's Club or something like that, which was age appropriate and the stuff that kids my age were reading. And I did like those
Goosebumps.
books. Yeah, I actually did like those books, but I was more drawn toward because I had played like the old CRPG games and computer games like King's Quest and stuff like that. So I was more drawn to fantasy books. And I don't know if you want me to go into, I guess it's maybe another question, but yeah, so that kind of really got me involved in Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms. I tried them both out right around the
So
same time.
you dove straight in with Dragonlance then.
I did. I Dragons of Autumn Twilight was one of the first fantasy books that I read around that time. I can actually remember it was the Books a Million in Sanford, and I picked it up because I saw there was a really cool looking dragon on the cover, and there was a woman on the cover. She had gold hair like me, and I thought that was really super cool. So I ended up getting involved in the story for all sorts of other reasons, but that's another story. And yeah, so I kind of delved deep into both. Yeah, so I kind of went a little bit long on that, but yeah, that's when I first realized I love books. I just was drawn to it. So then I
Bill,
preferred it over Friends.
when you read this book, did you jump straight from book 2 into this, or did you have to wait before getting your hands on this book?
Um, I think I waited a little bit because, if I'm not mistaken, I had Carrie was waiting for me next, and it was my second Stephen King book, so I read that first. I remember waiting though, but I do remember I was not prepared for this book
Yeah.
emotionally. I was not prepared.
I wasn't prepared for Spring Dawning or Winter Night.
Mhm.
Like I said, the very first time I was 15 or 16 or so, somewhere between 14 and 16, when I read these books back to back, because I got them all at the library at the same time. And they just looked gorgeous sitting there on the table, brand spanking new versions. But
Mhm.
on Twilight, didn't it was okay. I was sucked in, but Sturm, Brightblade's death just devastated me. I
Mhm.
had tears
See,
pouring down my face.
it bothered me, but it didn't devastate me like Flint.
Yeah, and then I read
That
this one.
absolutely it gutted me as an adult, dude. I
Yeah.
mean, the other day. And I'm like, this hurts so much worse. And I think it's the situation.
Yeah.
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 It's the way it happens that bothers me so much.
Well, it's
Mhm.
also there's a lot of in book one. I was wondering, recently when reading it recently, I was like, why do I like Flint? reading Autumn Twilight. I'm like, I didn't like Flynn, and I'm like, how did that happen? But then Winter Night, and then especially this book, it brought it all back. It brought it all back, and I don't know many times in fantasy or science fiction where a character who's seen in combat on a regular basis dies of a freaking heart attack.
Yeah.
That's what bugs me.
I
I'm
was
like,
like,
dude, at least Sturm went out fulfilling his purpose, being a knight, fighting, trying to, and then Flint just has a heart attack, and I'm like, come on, man,
that was
come
pretty
on.
that was pretty harsh.
It was very
So
harsh.
for me, it's, it hurt all the more because his purpose in a way seemed unfulfilled. You figured him dying in battle would be the way he would want to go. But at the same time, they make up for it later with the comments about where Fizban, and yes, I'm calling him Fizban because that is his god name to the Kinder, tells Tass about the tree. Oh, dear. Oh,
Yeah.
crying. My wife comes in the room. She's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "It's a book. It's the book."
Yeah.
But yeah, that really got
They did
me.
a lot of
So
foreshadowing in these couple books, especially this one.
They did.
I mean, we get flat out told what's going to happen with the next three books we see Tass and Raceland and Caramon in.
Yeah.
I mean, Palatine they're describing it, wasn't it Palatine, or
Yes.
was it? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, they did a lot. You don't notice. I didn't notice any in the first book, but in the second and third book, I noticed it.
So, Jen, do you have any memories of reading this book the first time?
I remember being like, "What the hell is going on?" And I know his name is Tanis, but when I first was reading him, I called him Tanis, so I'm just gonna say Tanis. I know it's wrong. But I was like, "What is wrong with you, dude? Why don't you pick a woman and freaking deal with it?" That was my emotion. Like I was like, "Listen, okay, what are you doing, betraying all your friends for a dragon high lord? Like, what are you doing? You know this is wrong. Stop it." Like, I really felt that, especially as a kid. I was like, okay, I'm not saying you can't have feelings for her, because how do you stop feelings for someone? But at the same time,
Right.
it's like,
When you
this
find
woman
out,
is like,
they're the
no.
leader in a horrible genocide committing army, it shouldn't be
Yes.
too hard getting over your feelings over.
I will say the dragons are looting, pillaging, burning crops, killing people, death by fire. You're on top dragonback overseeing this, and
As a child, I felt the same way. I was like, as a child, as a teen, I should say, I felt the same way. Having gone through my very first love and everything, there are points in my life before I met my wife where I would have took her back in a second, even though I knew she was evil to her core,
that's sad.
at least emotionally, but
That's
I would have.
sad, yeah.
So I can at least as an adult identify with Tanis being like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
those overwhelming feelings of seeing that person again after a long absence sort of hit you, and you're like, oh wow, I forgot how it felt to feel about somebody that way. And I'll give him a pass for sort of falling into that for a couple days, but he did get out of there as quick as he could.
He did.
Yeah.
So
He did.
And led the Draconian, whose name I cannot find because I listened to the audiobook, so I wanted to know how it was spelled. But he led that Draconian right to his friends. I'm not sure he really was a Draconian, because when Baron bashed his head in and killed him, nothing happened with the body. It didn't turn to stone. It didn't explode. It didn't
That's
turn
right.
to acid. It just went smush,
that's a good
bristly,
point. I
and then
missed that.
was laying there. And it's like,
That's a little weird. I never considered that. You know, but I'm glad
Yeah,
you
me
brought
either.
that
I
up.
missed it.
Me
yeah.
too.
There was
Huh.
another inconsistency that just was tickling at the back of my head the last
Good on
couple
you,
of weeks
Glenn.
that I can't think
Wow.
of right now.
Well, I love the spot on name of one of the dragon commanders as Turda. I mean, he was a pretty awful piece of
Yeah.
garbage. So his name Turd, it just made me giggle every time.
I've always enjoyed Few Master Toad's name. I've enjoyed that immensely. That's always been a good one. But anyway.
Yeah,
Good
my
job,
memories
Glenn. I didn't catch that.
It's not something that I would have caught until this last two rereads. I actually, in the last week, have read it twice.
Oh
I
wow.
read it in 8.5 hours because I put it on went Tuesday evening. I put it on at 2x speed and was going to listen through it all night, and I just got too tired. I had to go to sleep. Otherwise, I would have listened through it all night and written up my notes. And but yeah, I listened to it and literally almost straight through. I had like an hour yesterday afternoon when I got up to finish. So, all right.
Yeah, I
I'm
finished
glad you caught that.
yesterday about noon is when I finished. And like I said, my wife came out and I was literally on the couch, tears rolling down my face. She's like, "You okay?" And, yeah, okay, okay.
For both of you, the first time you read this book, who was your favorite character and why?
The first time I read this book, it's
For
always
me,
the same. It's
who?
Raceland. Always, especially when he does Chirac out in the middle of the cave and you see him make his decisions. And he's like, listen, I'm going to be a bad person, but for everything you guys have done for me in the past, I want to take care of you. He
He's
heals
going to do
Taz from the
something for them
poison.
once. One time.
Yes,
All
one
those
time.
years. All those
Yes.
years of them looking out for him. He doesn't
He's not
owe
a good
them
person.
anything.
No,
He
he
doesn't
doesn't.
owe them anything. He got really mad when Caramon tried hinting that he owed him something. This book made me mad at Raceland. I like Raceland.
Yeah, me too.
Up until that scene where he throws a fit and starts saying, "I'm only going to do this one thing for you." I was furious.
He's evil. He's
And
evil.
then
Evil.
he saved Tass's life.
He did.
And it all became good again. Because Tasselhoff,
yeah,
I love Tasselhoff. He's been my favorite character
my
for the whole time.
Yes.
Ever since the first
He's
book.
annoyed me the first two books, but I really found myself loving him this third book.
Yeah.
I found him slightly annoying before that.
Me too.
This book was like, okay, maybe I'm gonna have to do a Dragonlance D&D game and play as a Kender just because it could be fun.
that would be fun.
It'd be really fun.
I was a paladin from Forgotten Realms stuck with a Kender that somehow got to our world. And
that's funny.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
God, as a paladin?
I had to put up with it as a paladin. What do you do with a Kender when you're a paladin? Especially when you find out their nature.
You tie them up, man.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So
that's funny.
Has your reread hasn't changed then who your favorite character is?
I just nostalgia goggles really hit me hard with Raceland. He was just amazing that I thought when I was younger. Probably not, if not that, like I guess, the person who's the most pure and the person that just comes through and you didn't expect it is going to be Lorana. She's like,
I love it.
Yeah.
So she, when I was younger, I was more involved in like the original characters from the End of the Last Home. And Lorana was like, okay, whatever. She's wanting to prove herself, and I appreciate that about her, and I like her. But now in this reread, I'm like, no, she's actually going through a lot, and she knows what's going on with Tanis, and she just sucks it up, and has to really come through for the friends. So I like her being the Golden General and all that stuff that was done for her because she deserved it. She earned it. So I'll probably say, like, if I look back at it, realistically, Lorana has the biggest change, the biggest growth, steps up the most, which you're not expecting as a reader because you don't really know if she's gonna like go back, into being a princess at any time. But she doesn't. She really comes through. But for me, just personally, and Jenn's little heart, Raceland, even though he turns so evil and so horrific, I just still enjoy him as a character immensely. So yeah, that's gonna be my.
Is it still about Raceland for you, Bill?
Realistic answer, Lorana, then Raceland.
No, actually, like I said, I think it's Tass. Yeah, Tass completely surprised me, and maybe it's him growing up a little after Flint's death. You sort of see this different depth to him that we haven't seen before. So he hit a little different after that sort of sad event. There were times where he was still his usual self, but he seemed to mature a little. And yeah, I really enjoyed him and his POVs.
I
this
think
book.
I think seeing tasks in a better light, you have a little bit of help with not having the person around all the time that doubted every single thing Tasselhoff says he saw or heard and did, you know,
Right.
because Tass becomes a lot more of a character like that after Flint dies, as you pointed out. And without Flint there,
Mhm.
who's tearing Tasselhoff down? Tanis was the only other person who ever did, but he never said it out loud. He only thought it. That I can remember.
Well, I'm sure everybody thought it.
Yeah, I don't remember Karaman ever talking down, talking smack about the
No.
about the Kender. Raceland talked
No.
smack about everybody, so
He did.
Well, yeah. I mean, Raceland likes Raceland, and that's about it.
yeah,
Agreed,
it
yes.
sometimes finds use for Karaman.
That's
Has this
true.
reread changed your perspective on other characters?
Lorana, like she said, although I could have slapped her for falling for the whole trap thing,
Mhm.
that bugged me. I'm like, she knows better.
Yeah,
She, even if they had Tanis, she knows Tanis wouldn't want her to, you know, trade.
Yeah.
So that bugged me a little bit because that seemed a little out of character for a character who had, in this book up to that point, had been very smart,
Yeah.
yeah.
very smart. So
Were there any character flaws you noticed this reading for the characters you particularly like that you had not noticed before? Raceland's an asshole, not just evil. He's an asshole.
He is.
yeah, he
Undoubtedly.
always has been in my head. Because remember, I told you I did not like him
Yeah,
when I was a teen and read this. I did not like Raceland at all.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't like him, couldn't stand him.
Mm-hmm.
And this time I found him actually pretty appealing as a character because he's just so in depth in
Gross.
why he does the things he does and why he's sort of an ass.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but this book, man, wow. I mean, pretty much from the point he gets his hint from the librarian, what was his name?
Astinus.
Astinus.
Astinus?
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, without Astinus, he'd be dead.
Yeah.
He gave him the hint he needed to be able to, become the master of
Past.
Past,
the,
past
yeah.
and present.
And then he comes off like, I am the everything. I am the all. It's like, dude, no, a librarian helped you.
That's true with almost
Come on, man.
everything. The librarian is gonna
A
help.
chronicler.
Yeah, true.
Who's been alive since the beginning of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the beginning of the world, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah, I don't remember Tanis being so angry. There are parts where he
yeah.
has real displays of just frustration, anger, and he gets pissed off and snaps a couple times.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten about that. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, that was kind of a surprise to reread. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Tanis gets pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And Tanis is so totally who Kiefer Sutherland should have been playing in that voicing for that animated movie. Not
Yeah.
Raceland. Tanis deserves the voice of Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah. That's kind of like a character that Kiefer's played before too. Is someone like Tanis who's brooding but does to do the right thing, tries to do the right thing. Yeah, I could see him more as that than Raceland for sure. Raceland, whatever.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I kind of fluctuate between the two names.
Raceland.
Rastlin,
Yeah.
Raceland,
I've
Rasslin.
always said Raceland.
Well,
I don't know how
you
I
guys
figured
have
it
heard
out.
where the names Caramon and Raceland came from, right?
No.
So Weiss was saying that Caramon came from a derivative of the name Caring Man for Caramon.
He is the mother hen.
Raceland came from Wasting Man. So Caring
Oh.
Man and Wasting Man. But
Nice.
so in my brain, because it's coming from Wasting Man, I say Raceland, but they do say Rasslin, I think, in the movie, if I'm not sure.
I thought they said Raceland.
It's kind of however you want to take it.
I'm always big on trying to pronounce it the way the authors intend.
Mhm.
Especially with the name Moiraine. I don't like the name Moiraine or Moraine. It's Moiraine. But yeah, I had not remembered that Caramon was such as the one time he's referred to it's a mother hen was the term used in the books at one point, that he's the one that is always going to make sure everybody's okay, he like takes care of everybody, and just picturing the biggest, most burly warrior in the group who takes delight in killing, being the one to sit there and he's going to make you tea, he's going to puff the pillow behind your head, tuck you in, all that. And it's like, okay, it's just that I never, and I had forgotten all about that. And when I started seeing that, I'm like, really? I never caught on to that.
He has a character arc in the next 3 books that
Oh yeah.
is a big character arc. So
He frustrated me a little bit in this one.
he did.
Honestly, he did. Especially with his whole thing with Tika about my brother needs me. Like, dude, stop. You're allowed to have a life. So, I mean,
Poor Tika.
come on, man.
You've
I
already
know, dude.
you've already done and seen him kill you once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's before the dream. And you see him turn to a black robe. Let the man go.
Well, I mean, he's your brother, not your soulmate. There's a difference.
Yeah.
So
it's not your fault that he's so small and sickly. You don't have to fix that problem for him all the time.
I get being there for family, and I love my brother, but at the same time, I wouldn't pick him over my wife. So
Right.
Understandable. Yeah.
So it sounds like it's already has done this, but how would you say your life experience has changed your perspective on the story and the characters?
See, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
What I'll probably say to this. Oh, I gotta let you go ahead. I'm sorry, Glenn. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I want to hear what you say.
I will probably say that when I was young and I read this, it was really cool for me to see the most extreme characters. Sturm was the most extreme do-gooder. Raceland was the most extreme evil. Caramon was the most extreme mother hen. Okay, all of these characters were very extreme. I would say that my life experience has made me realize maybe the people that you don't really think about as much, like kind of in the middle, like I guess like Taz and Flint are the neutral characters, right? They're born of neutral races, they have neutral alignment. My life experience has taught me that maybe that's the better way to go, to be a more neutral person and not always strive to be the extreme version of oneself, whatever that is. Maybe that's not good. Extremes aren't good as by rule as a way of life. Because when I was young, I was like, that'd be awesome to be so strong or so powerful or so this or so that. Like when I'm growing up, I'm like, yeah, no, it's edgelord mentality. That's not, uh beneficial to society or yourself. So I think that the people in the middle are kind of overshadowed by the extreme people in society. And maybe the people that are on the edges of either good or bad are going to either self sacrifice or hurt others. And the people, like the common working man, is the glue that holds people and things together. So that's what I would say for real life experience.
Now, I might not have a family of my own, like kids of my own, but I spent a long time hanging out in part town where some of the business owners really treated the teenagers and early 20 somethings like crap, and I spent a lot of time looking out for these kids, standing up for them, trying to keep them out of any serious trouble. So I kind of felt like I've had teenagers at least, which has let me look at Tanis in a different way, because I'm not saying he's got teenagers, but he's got, compared to how old he is, they might as well be teens to somebody my age, because, having to, one, be the leader. Now, I'm not saying that I've ever really been the leader of many things. I have been a leader of a few things, but just the sense of responsibility and trying to be the one to make sure things got done that needed to be done that I saw with Tanis just really stood out to me, that, this time I was really able to identify with it. I think to an extent, for me at least, because he's kind of the dad of the group. Caramon's the mother hen, but Tanis is the dad of the group, even though he's not the oldest. I'm pretty sure he's still younger than Flint was.
Yeah, I think so.
I think.
So it was kind of the naive treatment, that as you got older,
Yeah.
you appreciate his stance and everything more.
And for all I know, a lot of it could actually be directly influenced by Nynaeve. Because I was 18 when I started reading The Wheel of Time. My adult life has been informed by The Wheel of Time. From the beginning of my adult life. Actually, yeah, I was 18 when I first read them. Because I read them the same summer.
I think for me, the one thing that sort of my life experience made different for me was the Everman. I forgot most of the details of his story. I remembered him in general, but I really got sucked into his story. And yeah, man, such empathy for that guy.
Me
I
too.
mean,
Yeah.
so for me, I think that was my biggest change. I noticed a lot of the smaller players a lot more this time around. And like you said, I think that's just life experience. You sort of look for the gray areas. Everything isn't black and white like it was when I was a teen and I read it,
Right.
and you're good and you're bad. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, well, I'd say Raceland's part of what, as a teenager, what was able to let me get away from the whole black and white, and that being, good or you're bad. You can't be a combination. Because Raceland, yeah, he goes red,
To
he
me,
goes
he was
black
just
robes.
bad.
He goes black
Yes.
robes, and he's an asshole.
Yes.
But, even as a black robe, he would still stop and help Boo Boo if he ran into her and she needed help.
He would.
I'm pretty sure I remember him helping back in the past, during the Twins trilogy, Legends. I'm pretty sure there's a couple of points where he's helping some more downcast, undertrodden, people, beings.
Well, let me ask you this. Does that one redeeming quality make up for the rest of the negatives?
No, but I'm just saying, I
Okay.
can't say he's entirely evil.
No,
Yeah.
agreed. I wanted to know the mindset
Yeah.
on that whole thought of, okay,
Is it like,
that one redeeming quality,
yeah,
does that make up for
No,
it's
it doesn't.
black at a
the rest?
95% opacity. So it's really, really, really dark gray,
Right.
is what it is. Really dark gray. But he's definitely a shade of gray. And I actually say like I pointed out when we did Dragons of Autumn Twilight, I was really disturbed to see the glee Caramon took at having a chance to go kill some goblins and hobgoblins and eventually draconians, and just he I didn't like seeing so much excitement to go kill, and it just like, and so Caramon, he's
Rubbed
good at
against your
heart.
hippie nature.
He's good at heart, but he's got a dark side too. You can't be really good and look forward to killing things, especially things that are smaller than you. Because
Well,
no
at the
goblin
same
comes
time,
anywhere near his size.
yeah, at the same time, by the time you get to the end of these books and see some of the atrocities that they carry out, I'm a little more okay with him being happy about killing him. Doesn't bother me as much, to be honest. If you consider it wartime, would you rather have the guy who's willing and ready to kill or the hesitant guy right next to you?
But it wasn't war at all
So,
the time. The very first scene where we get with Caramon enjoying killing was in Autumn Twilight. It was outside of Solace before they'd even found out that
yeah, it was on the road.
Yeah, and he looked forward to it. It's a
Well, I took that. I interpreted that anyway. I could be completely wrong, but like I think the guy had a lot of stress issues with dealing with his brother all the time, and of course, obviously, seeing his brother kill him. So I think he didn't have any way to take that out because he's constantly caring for this frail thing next to him who could maybe one day kill him. Who knows? So if he has a way to get out some aggression, oh, here's a perfectly okay chance for me to get out some aggression on some evil character. I gotta get it out. I don't have any other way to do that. But I agree. I see what Glenn's saying. I understand.
Oh yeah, I agreed in the first book that as a first scene that was jarring, and I even commented on it when we talked about it. I'm like, yeah, that he was
And
really quick to want to kill
Flint was
things.
too. Flint looked forward to killing too.
He was a seasoned warrior though. That guy's like
Yeah.
a vet through and through. Like you just get the feeling of all right, it's hack and slash time. Let's go. Like that was definitely the vibe I got from Flint.
So I brought up the thing that I had of having forgotten that Caramon was the mother hen.
Mm-hmm.
What element or detail in this story had you forgotten about since your first read that pleasantly surprised you when you reread it?
Pleasantly surprised? Oh, I'm gonna have to
Or
think about that one.
negatively surprised? You got any, Bill?
I forgot about the good dragons for the most part.
Oh, okay.
I mean, honestly, I really did. I completely forgot about the good dragons. They had been mentioned, but I forgot about them being pretty heavily featured.
See,
And then when the elf shows up with them, I'm like, oh yeah,
yeah,
I forgot about those. Oh, I completely forgot about
the
them.
metallic dragons
I
stuck in my
enjoyed some of
head.
those interactions.
The metallic dragons have always stuck in my head just because I remember them in most forms of D&D had the metallic versus the chromatic dragons to some extent. And I've
Mm-hmm.
always been annoyed by the fact that we have bronze dragons and brass dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Both of the metals are made of copper when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the metal, but we don't have a copper dragon. And exactly what does a bronze dragon or bronze and what's the difference in appearance between a bronze and a brass dragon?
That would
Those
be very
colors aren't
difficult.
really
I think the bronze is darker. It's
maybe
almost leaning towards a yellowish brown.
okay. But there's no copper dragons. We get silver, gold, bronze, and brass, and then the platinum dragon. Those aren't
And
the
silver.
colors that silver, gold, silver, and gold. Yeah,
Silver
Red,
and
blue,
gold. Sorry.
they're bad, but yeah.
yeah,
Gosh, so the pleasantly surprised, I guess I would have to go back to what Bill was saying because Barum and his sister, the Everman, get introduced so much later in the story. I was like reading it when I was younger. I was almost kind of like, even though this is this very central plot point, like I'm like, God, I just let me get back to the original heroes. I don't want to hear about
Right.
this guy. This guy's kind of annoying. Like he's not really annoying. He's there. It's not his fault. But I'm like, yes, he needs to be there because you need the his chest, the jewel buried inside of it. It's a huge central plot point to why Takesis can't come like actually into this world. Like I get it. I understand that he needs like to bring that back, whatever. But I'm like, can we just please get back to the characters that I have been reading
yeah.
about for the past 3 books? So reading it later, I'm like, okay, no, Jen, chill the out. It doesn't all need to always be these 7 people.
Right.
It's okay to introduce someone else into
It,
the
it's
storyline.
like there's more to the wheel of time than Randall Thor.
There
A
is.
lot more to the wheel of time than Randall Thor.
Oh, thank God I didn't have those goggles in the Wheel of Time though, because I
Oh,
know some people that actually
Ooh.
have that, and I'm like, no, I care more about the other characters actually than him. But I know other people do not feel that way. That is a thing. Yes.
I remembered the
I'm like,
other.
dude, I didn't appreciate Androl until I was like 30.
Oh, I
And I'm
liked it.
like, oh my
Oh,
God, Androl's the
I
best.
He's
like Andrew.
awesome.
I never disliked
Me too.
Andrew. I
Oh, I
don't
didn't
even. I can't.
dislike him.
Yeah, I can't even say I
I
dislike. Well,
just didn't,
I can't say I
whoa.
hate Gowan. I kind of dislike Gowan,
Oh, I do.
but I don't
I
hate
can.
Gowan. I think he's an
A lot of
idiot,
people do.
but I just
Yeah.
dislike him.
I hate him.
No, I remembered what it
He's
was. I said I had.
selfish. I hate him.
Is there anything in these books, and I'm sure you'll find something that clashes with modern day mores and perspectives on life and just the general the overall society as a whole? I'm not talking like small groups within the society who still hold hate in their heart, but is there anything that stood out as to not working for you and
Not
breaking
in
that?
this book. Not in this book.
The two
I
previous?
I just feel like maybe, and I think that they kind of got away from this, but at first Lorana was too much of a spoiled princess and that kind of thing, but she actually kind of proved that she wasn't, so that was kind of nice. um Kit has always been like a very fierce, strong woman. Like that's kind of what she
Yeah.
was. They didn't really have that. Not not in this book. I think they did very well kind of addressing the fact that Tanis was trying to make his way with a lot of racism. Growing up with, there was a lot of absolute racism toward his past.
Yeah.
And I think they did a very good job, actually, as far as moral standards of today would show, of someone like him being a good person and him just trying to get away from that racism's bad, and that could really mess with an individual who could otherwise, if he was like shown to, if he grew up in an environment where he could thrive, he wouldn't have all these anger issues and the things that he has
Yeah.
today through no fault of his own. So yeah, I think it actually holds up pretty well, those as far as the racism goes that he uh was dealing with. Obviously, Kender has a big, racism issue within the books, but they showed that Taz is one of the most wholesome and wonderful people that you could have in the party. So actually, I really,
Even though he'll
Except,
steal you blind.
except
yeah,
he'll borrow
that's
things and
true.
find things, and things will fall into his lap.
But but I think actually no, for the time, as far as like social justice issues and that sort of thing, I think that part of it holds up pretty well, actually. And I'd be interested to hear what you guys say. There may be something that I might not be taking into account. So I can't think of anything right now.
For me, I think the only thing that really bothered me in this particular book, I mean, other than the outright genocide sort of from, which is just,
See, we did a genocide. Yeah.
yeah. The attempted sexual assault of Lorana, that bugged me. So I cheered when Tass absolutely shanked him. Made me happy.
That's nice. Yes.
But yeah, that's never really been socially acceptable. But like I said, that was the only thing that really bothered me. There weren't any outstanding issues I had.
The problem I have, I want to say it's a D&D problem, but then I realize it's a fantasy problem. Or at least it was a fantasy problem for a long time. And that's, as I talked about previously, I don't remember, I think I mentioned this once on What the Adaptation, and I know I talked about it with Bill and Matt last time, but we basically have races of hats. There's the old sci-fi trope, Planet of Hats, where everybody on that planet wears the same hat. They do the same thing. They live the same way. They're all the same. Everybody on this planet, they're the same way like that. They're with their own. Here we have a species of hats where they're all the same. They're a monoculture. The orcs, the goblins, the draconians. Well, orcs appear in everywhere, but all these different species or races, as they got called in D&D, are evil. Certain species are evil, certain are good. Like metallic dragons are good, but a chromatic dragon is evil. Even though in Dragons of Twilight, we get given an example of a red dragon who was fairly benevolent. Yeah, she was old and senile, but she was still relatively, pretty dang benevolent. So I still, it sits wrong with me, the idea of having all orcs or all Trollocs. I mean, Trollocs and Murdrons, Shadowspawn, that's a different thing. Sort of. I mean,
I think the Draconians need to be taken off that list. We know why they are the way they are.
Magic.
The way they're created.
Because I know you do it with
the way they're created with the good dragon's eggs.
Yeah.
And steeped in a pool of the queen of freaking evil.
But if you make you do you do something similar with the evil dragon eggs, and you get good aligned draconians. I learned that looking up draconians. There's a whole nother group
didn't know
of
that.
draconians out there that are
makes
made
sense.
from the eggs of metallic, or not metallic dragons, but chromatic dragons.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I can see that happening.
but
But yeah, we've had a shift in fantasy, like I
yeah,
said before.
that's what I'm
Like
saying. I
D
think
and
it's
D,
a
you can play
fantasy
half orcs and
problem.
orcs that aren't bad guys.
Yeah.
I have a Pathfinder game we're going to be starting tomorrow, where I'm playing an orc barbarian who's not a bad guy.
Not even of
Mm.
half orc. Wow, full orc. I like
No,
that.
he's a full orc. Yeah.
I played a half orc who
So
was trying to become a paladin.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's interesting. Yeah.
but
Mm.
so let's go with what if any are some themes and or character flaws that you notice now that you may have missed in your previous readings of this book,
That I missed.
or just any themes you want to bring up in general.
The themes question.
Yeah.
I enjoy those.
can't escape it.
Yes.
Well, we did escape it for all of season 1 of Wheel of Time, but that's not going to happen for season 2.
Hmm. I was about to say, I will say in this
Ooh.
book, the character flaws are something that is integral to the plot of the story, so you can't really miss that. Like Raceland being a bad guy is integral. Tanis trying to choose, I know it's Tanis, between the two loves of his
You're
life
fine.
is a huge integral plot point to this story. So it's like those things are pretty on the nose as far as the way they were written intentionally that way. They were supposed to be that way. So if the characters didn't have their flaws and Sturm having his, wanting to be a good Solemnic knight is essential to a plot point of the story. So I don't think they were intentionally written to be like what carries the plot device further. So I don't know if there's anything I really could have missed as far as that goes because this book particularly isn't written that way. In those, unless you guys disagree, I would love to hear like if you guys can think of anything honestly, because I don't know. And themes I'd have to think about. Themes is just evil. The biggest theme is evil always turns in on itself. Like evil will always work to undermine itself. And that's
I think
something
they
that
even
they try
flat
to.
out say that at one point
Yes.
too.
Oh, they do. It's a prophecy from the goddess.
Yeah,
What is it, Mishka?
Mishakal.
Mashakal?
Well, yeah.
I'm saying it incorrectly. Yeah.
So am I. So it's
Well,
okay.
apparently, I've been saying the Queen of Darkness's name wrong for decades. I've always said Takesis.
Takesis? So have
Uh,
I. Okay, is that
uh,
wrong? Okay.
the audiobook narration I just listened to called her Techisis.
No,
Yeah, same with me.
I reject
Yeah.
that.
I had
I reject the doctrine. No, I'm playing. It
so
could be both. Yeah.
I'm like, I never had paid attention that it's Isis is the last half of the name,
Ooh.
and so that's why I figured the
That makes
narrator got
sense.
that.
Isis rebirth. Okay. That. Oh yeah, like the Egyptian got it. Okay, I see that.
Archisis.
Yeah, I can see where that makes sense. Wow.
For me, the character flaws are out there. I mean, they're integral to the story because for me, the overall theme is redemption.
Mm.
Just about every character has, a flawed moment, scene, or span of the book, and then redemption. So
Let's see, when I saw that stuck out to me was trusting and distrusting. Everybody had some element of having to trust or distrust, even if it's just such a silly little example of Flint Fireforge not trusting Tass when he says, "I just saw Raceland," when they're,
right.
and which city was that? Palanthus or something like that.
Yeah, Palanthus.
Palanthus, thank
He
you.
saw him on the steps of the library.
Yeah, so no, and who believes the Kender? Nobody. But how often does the Kender turn out to be right? Too often, way too often, for them to be like distrusting him. And because they don't trust him because he takes property from people, I think that distrust is, and also the fact he seems so young. And I'm sure he's probably not the youngest of them. I think that's Tika, but you know, I don't know, trust and distrust was one. That it was all over the place. I mean, it was with Kitiara. Whether or not to trust Kitiara. Whether or not she could trust
I'd never
Tanis.
trusted her.
No,
Mhm.
I
No.
never. I don't know if I ever read those books. The books with her and Sturm traveling together. That just does.
I
I don't
don't
see
want
how
to.
that.
I know what the end result of that is and what became of
Yeah,
that.
I
So
don't
I
know
don't think
how
I
that
need to
ever
read the
worked.
story.
And that sounds like an open wound of a book.
It's
I
such
mean,
an
Yeah.
why would
open
I do
like
that
what do you want to
myself?
like why are you trying to do this to yourself? You know how it
You gonna pour salt in it? Come on, man. It already hurts. Don't
Yeah,
don't don't do that.
don't. Yeah, it's not.
So, any other thoughts on themes, especially anything that anybody want to bring
I
up?
I like how you said trust, Glenn, because that definitely, upon reflection, that's the entire thing about like why they baited Lorana and the trust issue there and stuff like that. It's a huge theme in this book, particularly since we're on this one. So yeah, I like that. No, nothing
And
more to
you'll
add.
notice that those who are untrustworthy are the very ones you shouldn't trust to begin with, and that don't have trust in anybody else themselves. I mean, and that's all the evil characters, as you brought up.
Mhm.
The one evil character that I can't even believe I forgot to mention, my boy Lord Soth.
Oh
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, everybody's
I don't remember.
favorite.
yeah. Death Knight.
I don't
Eesh.
Oh
remember how
yeah,
many other books outside of this book, and then he's in the Legends
Ravenloft.
books. Yeah, but I didn't play Ravenloft. I read a couple of books,
Me too.
specifically the very first one that was the Ravenloft one with him on the cover, because
Yeah, me too.
He started Ravenloft.
Yes, he did.
I'm in the middle of Curse of Strahd right now,
Are
so
you?
I may
Okay,
be seeing him.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm like, oh god.
Lord Soth is an amazing character,
isn't he?
and
Oh man.
if you can get him to give his word, you can trust him.
Yeah.
Usually, mostly,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm,
maybe not
mm,
all the time, but almost all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
because
You know
his
what's
word
really
still
creepy to think
matters to
about
him.
is that if a couple of things, if Stir Brightblade had just made a couple of different choices, especially what we know with him on him and Kitiara, could have gone a little bit like that. Maybe
oh,
different things had set out a little bit differently. So
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. You see Sturm, I think Soth is almost like the anti-Sturm a little
yeah.
bit. It's
He's the antithesis of everything Sturm
yes.
stood for.
So it's very interesting. I enjoyed Soth immensely. I think we all do. Everybody
He
likes
creeped me
He's
out, and I
such
love that.
creepiness, right? He's awful. You love him.
Oh,
I
that
always enjoy
song
lawful
that the
evil
Banshees
characters.
sing for him.
Mhm.
I've always found been really enjoyed lawful evil characters
Mhm.
in books.
Mhm.
At least
Mhm.
characters that with that basic persona in life or outlook on life.
Mhm.
Not that I side with them. I'm chaotic good with lawful neutral tendencies.
So you must really enjoy the next books and the next what happens with an entire order that sprang
Yeah,
from lawful evil characters
it's
that they
been a
did
while
in the
since I've
books.
read. It's been a while
Okay.
since I read them.
Sturm's
Next books
kids,
we're
that's all I'm
reading.
gonna say.
The next one I'm actually reading for this show is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula
Mhm.
K. Le Guin, because we're
Mhm.
having Dr. Philip Chase on for that for three
Mhm.
shows. Three
No.
shows.
Good for
Yeah, I'm
you.
excited. So, our last question we have about the book: would
Uh-huh.
you guys recommend this book to younger readers
Absolutely.
or mature readers?
No. Absolutely not.
Why one and not the other?
Because I selfishly want
Okay.
people to really like fantasy. Okay, that's what I want. Even if it's a different fantasy series than I enjoy, I just want people to like fantasy. Okay, I think that a young reader can really getting involved in the characters and the world creation and everything like that, and they don't have to put a lot of emotional or thought like into what the characters motivations are. It's very much written on the page. You can just this book is so great because it's a wonderful way to have your escapism in fantasy without putting too much emotional labor or something into why are these characters the way they do? Can you trust the things that I'm reading? You don't have, like, things are pretty much written out for you and you go along for the ride so that you can be a part of the group, right? We all love this story because we're part of the group. Like, we feel like we're there in the heat of battle with these characters. We know what Tanis is going to do. We know what Tika's going to do. We know, like, we're happy and to be in this environment with these people and the eternal struggle of good and evil that you're going through, where you have these magnificent dragon battles in the sky, and it's encapsulating, and you're like, yes. I think that's perfectly geared toward a younger reader. And a lot of people that were young, including me, because I'm older than I look, okay, were got involved in the fantasy. They opened my door, and I know, even though if I take myself out of it, other young readers can have the ability, at least potentially, to feel that way too. For an older reader, I think reading this, and especially if someone's, the more uh nuanced a person is, like if an adult, have you read a lot of books? And they're like, yeah, I've read quite a bit of books, just no fantasy books. I
You're
would
not
be like,
gonna like this.
you're not going to like these books, and it's going to actually reaffirm your feelings of why you don't like fantasy, because you're used to uh mysteries that maybe pop in a book, or if things go sideways from the way that you think it's going to go, and people like being surprised. These books don't have anything like that. So for an adult reader, it's not going to give the sort of like payoff in that way that I think some adult readers enjoy from reading books. And some fantasy authors have that, but these don't, and I think that's intentional, and I like them for what they are. And I think they're beautiful, and they should still be there to get a younger audience involved always. Like, I think they're great. Um, but I think that a lot of the very tropes, because they're extremely trope heavy, but that's kind of the
Yeah.
point, and it misses the point for an older audience.
Except,
So,
I don't think
yeah.
when these books first came out, they would have been called as trope heavy, because I think some of these tropes started with Dragonlance.
I think
As a
I
matter of fact,
agree.
other than one book, Dragonlance is literally the first fiction that TSR ever published for D&D,
Mm-hmm.
aside from one book.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first books that were ever published. That in itself is a trope now. You know,
Yes.
I mean, this was before there were Star Wars books. This
Mm-hmm.
is before there were licensed franchises with books in them, except Star Trek, which I always forget about because I've never once read a Star Trek novel. Surprisingly. Bill, how about you? Younger readers, older readers?
Younger readers, absolutely, 100% yes. I think it's a great sort of gateway into fantasy for younger readers. Adults, yes, with a caveat, depending on the person. If I'm talking to somebody who's, you know, read Song of Ice and Fire, and they're into grimdark, no, I'm not going to recommend this to them at all, type thing.
No
But I mean, if
politics.
somebody who's never read fantasy and they're like, what's something I could get through really quick without too much bother, I'd be like, Dragonlance Chronicles, great way to start.
I can think of
So, yeah,
quite a few grown up
That's true.
fantasy readers that I would say, with a caveat, let
yeah,
them understand what it is. It's not great fiction, it's not great literature. There's a good
No.
story there. The
Yeah.
prose gets better. The prose gets better each book, I would say.
yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd make sure they understand. I would describe it to them as YA. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the more I think about it, it probably, if it was published today, it would probably come out labeled YA if it was
Mm-hmm.
initially published. I don't know if they've switched it to the YA shelves or not. Who
I
knows?
don't
But
think so.
the
Yeah, I don't think so either.
and that's not to knock on YA, because I have read some stuff that was supposedly YA that I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Um, but Yeah, I wouldn't. I kind of agree. I wouldn't tell that many older people, but there still are enough older people I would. But yeah, kids,
Mm,
anyone 13 and up, I would say,
yeah.
maybe even 12. And that's just me being an old fart. Because to be honest, I read Dune when I was 12. So you
That's
know,
crazy.
yeah, if I was reading Dune at 12, I really shouldn't be telling somebody they can't read Dragonlance until they're 13. You know, I actually,
Their later series, the Dark Sword trilogy, I think really shows their growth as authors.
and I'm hoping we
Mm,
get onto those at some point with a guest who's
Yeah,
read
I mean,
those. I'll read them for my first time.
me too.
yeah, I mean that trilogy is really good. And I remember after reading Dragonlance later, much later in life, my wife started reading The Dark Sword and brought it to me, and I'm like, "Oh, Weiss and Hickman." I'm like, "Yeah, Dragonlance." She's like, "I don't know what that is, but I think you're gonna like these."
Okay.
So I was like, "Oh, A, you need to read Dragonlance."
Yeah, I've only read the one book outside of Dragonlance, something of the Rose or Rose of the Prophet or something like that. I think was the title. It was like the
Mhm,
first book in a series, and I never continued it. The one
mhm.
I wanted to check out, I think she wrote. I don't know if they wrote it together, if it was just her, but she wrote a science fantasy series. Characters on the cover with lightsabers. It looked a lot like a lightsaber, but you had actual,
Mm,
um,
Hmm,
it was some sort of
that doesn't sound
space science
familiar.
fiction fantasy crossover. I
mhm.
could swear I remember it being hers, but I think
Huh.
we've gotten through most of what we have to talk about, if not all. Anybody have anything else to bring up?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Hopefully,
I
Elliot.
don't.
Hopefully, Elliot will be able to be back next week. Um, Next time we record, I should say. We'll be seeing about that soon enough. Hopefully, he will be back. I'm kind of annoyed he hasn't been here these 3 episodes now. He promised he'd be back, but
We need vacation, man.
yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Thanks for doing this show with me, Bill. I've been having a blast so far with you. And
Yeah, me too. And thank you, Jen, for coming on and discussing Dragonlance with us.
Thank you
yes,
so much for having me.
And
and
we hope to have you back for some future books.
Yes, I would love to.
Dragonlance and more stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
We might be able to fit you in with the Rift
Forgotten
War
Realms.
era stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Rift
no,
Warrior
so
stuff too.
that way poor Ben doesn't have to be here for 6 straight weeks, 6 straight episodes. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Interesting. I'll be able to.
Ben. So everybody at home, thanks for watching. Come back next time where we have Dr. Philip Chase from the Philip Chase channel on discussing A Wizard of Earthsea, which I literally have not touched in 40 years. So,
Wow.
Me too.
it's, and don't forget to be awesome.